Tycho Decay, the horror short film that we've been working on. This week we're going to be talking about the title, Tycho Decay, and how we actually got to it, and kind of the behind the scenes, and then also the design of the title graphic itself. So I guess that starts with me, or I guess I could give the background.
Well, let's show it first. We'll show the title animation.
Okay, yeah, show.
So
while you're doing that, originally, because it was going to be more in like a Dead Space type thing. We were working on it, and I remember you saying, "Hey, we need to come up with a different title. Like, here's something that you can do some research, get some work done, and kind of see where that goes." And so, the two things you gave me were that it needs to kind of encompass something like space related, and then also jungle, because that's the two themes that we're kind of meshing together in the short. And so that's kind of where I went from. I was like, okay, well, the jungle thing is kind of easier, but what was trying to like figure out, okay, what's the most important part? And I just kind of ran with that of like, okay, Dead Space, how does that kind of work? I know you talked about aliens before as well, so I was kind of going based off of that to go down it. Did you pull it up? Because I still don't see it.
No, I'm about to share it if you're
okay.
whenever you're ready.
Yeah, right. No, go ahead.
So I'm gonna move you. You can see I'm sharing my screen, right? You can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is our current title animation that I just knocked out today. So it's pretty standard at the moment. But I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do with this? And I tried running the scan lines across it for a while there and stuff. So we'll see if I keep the glitchiness. But I watched our edit again, which no one else has seen. But there's like a cool kind of sound effect that happens, and then the title comes on. So I was playing with that, and I think this works for now. And I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of done is better than perfect. And this is one of those things where I'm like, I could sit here forever tweaking it and trying to make it like more unique and better, and not just like, oh, it's yet another glitch effect. But it also kind of works. The one thing I do want to do is make the decay part a little more clear. It like the decay grows, but right now it grows like only in the very beginning and only for like a half second, and it's kind of hard to catch. So I think I'm gonna make that more clear and happen throughout the like life of the title animation. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the glows and everything else on it.
Yeah,
the design.
I like it.
Yeah, it works.
It works well.
And it's no worse than what makes me happy, I will say, is I do something like this and I'm like, it's derivative, it's standard, it's boring, it's not interesting. And then I'll watch something professional, like a feature film, and it's crazy how there's this thing that happens. I will say, I want to talk to the filmmakers out there. There's this thing that happens with independent and small films that doesn't happen with feature films, and it's kind of funny to me, because if you were to do something, and I have a prime example that I'm going to tie this into really well, as simple as a lot of the feature films, or even like non-centered, like a lot of things just like aren't centered, they're not correct, you would be judged for it as an independent filmmaker and as someone doing something small time. And like artists run into this problem all the time, where I know really great artists that are like really skeptical of the work. But if you're a giant artist, if you have like a huge art studio, you can get away with so much that like small people can't get with, because you have this like authority coming with you, if that makes sense. So here's a prime example, and we're going to talk more about this afterwards, but this caught me as kind of funny because it's just 2D text that rotates and goes from black to colored, and then the texture on it is so like over the top, right, with like grunge and this like blood splatter, and like, you know, to me it's a very like what I did this back in like 2002 as like a with Photoshop, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I can use the text to be a mask or matte for the texture, and then you choose, like, you just crank the saturation and the contrast, and you're like, that's my logo. And it's funny because this is like so simple, and I'm not even saying it's bad, by the way. I'm just saying, if I made this, I would be like, this is so easy to do. I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. But like everyone watching it's like, yeah, they're like excited. Furiosa, it's gonna be so great. Um, but like, and then
I are they? I
Aliens, another great one. Oh, here's another one. Um, if you do the Alien opening title, like if I did this for our film and just had one little like line
hmm
just like fade on in like sort of random order, you'd be like, this is kind of crappy. Like, oh, it's Alien across the whole screen. You know, like it's very simple, and we'd be judging ourselves as like it just fades on. It's just a, you know, transparency from
Well,
zero
I
to
don't know
one.
about I actually don't know about that. Like, yes, it is. It's a simple in execution, but
Right.
the idea of drawing it out. And now, granted, you're using a specific text that at the time probably wasn't that unique, but it evokes that science fiction type of idea. Um, but I also am looking at it being like, that takes patience, which
No, no, no.
is
I think there's all sorts of qualities to this that make it good. I think it's a good
okay.
opening title. The thing
Okay.
is, what I'm saying is, if I did this as an independent filmmaker, right, it'd be like that's lame. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like I would like as filmmakers, there's this thing that happens. I noticed this back when I was in film school, and what happens is like you think everything has to be perfect and flashy and it has to show some sort of skill that no one else has, right? Like
Yeah.
there are certain titles that um when you go to like art of the title, for instance, right? This is a great resource if anyone's looking to make titles. And you go to title sequences, view all titles. There are some of these that you look at, like the Last of Us opening titles, and you're like, holy crap, that's amazing. That's so hard to do. How did they do that? Right? Like this is what I think a title sequence should look like as someone like in the world of 3D,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're like that looks so impressive, but especially this last part where it's like there's a camera lens blur, all these veiny things happen, the veins create the title, right? And the title's like very subtle, and but also like, oh, it's so good, it's so well done, because it's not simply, I don't know if you can tell this, but it's not simply through the stream compression, it's not simply a mask, right? Like it's not simply a
Yeah.
2D thing, like it has depth to it. There's like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
veins inside of the text. So I look at that and you think like, wow, that's what a professional title looks like,
hmm
right? And then if you were to look at, this or this, you're like, that's not a professional title. That's the title
Yeah.
an amateur would make, right? Um, like anyone with any knowledge, like you could make this title in GIMP, right? I give you a
Yeah.
concrete texture, you tint it yellow, you turn up the saturation, and then you use the text as a cutout. Like, and you have no offense, but like no design
I
chops.
yeah, no, I've no, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like if I ask you come up with a title for this, and you're like, yeah, let's just have like a cool concrete like texture, like you could come up with that. The the Last of Us one, that's hard to even come up with. Like you're sitting there like, oh, what should it do? And then you have like this crazy idea. Well, it should grow, from this natural organic substance to become the title, and I have to direct what shapes, and I have to like have the shapes fade off in an interesting way that's not just going from bright to dark, but there's like they turn gray. It's like they die out. The color bleeds away slowly. It doesn't just fade on or off, right? And so we look at that and we go like, oh, I have to do that. And if I don't do that, I'm not valid. I'm not a real artist, right?
Yeah.
And then when you go and watch actual films, it's something like this, and you're like, well, anyone could do that, right? Like, and so it's kind of funny to me how art works like that. It's the same way if you've ever tried to like play a song, like write a song, write music, and you're like, I can't rhyme with time or something like that, right? You're like, that's dumb. And then you go to like listen to like the top song on the radio, and it's like, I'm out of time for this rhyme. I'm on the grind, and you're like, this doesn't even rhyme well. Like it's like what we put importance on is what I'm trying to get at isn't that important sometimes. So while I look at this and go, oh, it's basic, it's derivative, it's a thin font with a treatment and the glitch effect. Everyone's seen a glitch effect a million times.
Yeah.
If it works for the piece, it works, right? Like if
Yes.
Alien is
Yes,
a
I
very
agree.
simple thing, and if it communicates mystery, and you're like, I do love. Really, my favorite part is this and this. Here, your brain hasn't figured it out yet,
Yeah.
and so you're like, oh, is this some weird? What's going on here? It's some weird, and you're like, oh, it's like they're making a little shape. Cool. They made like a little shape
Well,
between the three things. You're like, all
yeah,
right,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like a user interface.
That's kind of the thing where I'm like, I like it because I know that yes, what you're saying is the design of it is simple, but it's
Yeah.
actually very. And this is actually okay. This goes to my view of titles, which is I hate bad titles,
Yeah.
and I think that you should always at least have a reason why behind something. Because I hate it when it's just like a stupid name or something, and like, and it can work. Sometimes it can be a simple thing. Alien is a great example. Perfectly good
Are
name
you
for
one
what
of the
you're
people that
doing.
gets triggered when they say the name of the movie in the movie?
I don't, but I've also seen it where it's happened, and I've been like, oh my gosh, mainly because the movie's bad. And I
It
just roll my
depends on
eyes. You're
what
just
it
like,
is. If it's like,
if it's dude where's my car, I accept the fact that that is going to be in the movie. In fact, that's
yeah,
literally the one line they say most in the movie.
yeah, dude,
Um,
where's my car?
yeah,
Yeah, if
but
it's
if
dude,
it's if it's something ridiculous, I can't even remember like off the top of my head like what movie has done that. Even though I'm sure there has been. It just
yeah,
yeah. Um, I'm trying like
it's
here's a great example. Um, and it's tough because I don't think every movie. It's the same thing. Every movie doesn't have to have this super great title behind it, but like a great example, which is always bothers me, is Edge of Tomorrow.
mm-hmm,
I, for the longest time, like I remember watching that movie and being blown away and thinking, "Holy crap, this is a great
so good.
movie." And then it was maybe like years later where it dawned on me what the term Edge of Tomorrow means
Mm-hmm.
within the confines of the movie, and it was a brilliant title. I
I
was like,
really love
"Oh,
it. It's all you
oh,
almost get
that's
there, and then you get to the edge, and then it resets, and then you get there, and it
yeah,"
resets.
and you're
Yeah.
like, "Holy crap, that's genius."
Mm-hmm.
And then they changed it to like Live Die Repeat because people didn't go see the movie and they thought it was because of the title. It's like, no, it's because Tom Cruise was in another sci-fi movie that
Yeah.
was called Oblivion at
Yeah.
the same time, and no one knew which one was which. We all thought they were the same movie.
Yeah. There is a bunch of things with that, with the same movie issue, and then um, I will say, I think what happened is they did a marketing campaign which was Live, Die, Repeat,
They
and
did, yes,
that
yes, they did.
marketing campaign ended up being what everyone associated with the movie. And I'm pretty sure there's people that were
Yeah.
like, oh, I want to see Live, Die, Repeat. And the people
Well,
at the box
even
office were like, what? What do you want to see? And they're like, the movie. Because it kept saying like Live, Die, Repeat, Live, Die, Repeat. And then it was like Edge of Tomorrow. It's like,
I
well,
think
wait a second, that's not the movie. So I think people started associating that term with the movie, and
well,
then
they did a terrible thing with it too, though. Is if I remember correctly, I don't know if I'll be able to find it, um, but I'm pretty sure that even the first DVD that they issued
Mhm.
with Edge of Tomorrow, so the tagline was "Live Die Repeat," but even on the spine of it, they put "Live Die Repeat." So you
Right,
didn't even see the title of the movie. You
right,
saw the tagline, which then you're like, oh, okay. So they mixed it up. They really mixed it up a bit. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and granted, the title of I think it's from a manga, and the title of the
yeah,
manga is "All You Need Is Kill." It's
yes,
like
yes, yes.
that's a better name. That's a better name than Live Die Repeat. Like
All You Need Is Kill is pretty cool.
I don't. Yeah, I'm like I don't know what that means, but I'm in. I'm in for
Yeah,
it.
the so anyway, so titles. I mean, I also have a pet peeve with titles. This show's just gonna be called the pet peeve show, but my pet peeve with titles
I'm telling you, we're gonna do a video of our pet peeves.
are needlessly complicated titles, and my favorite is always Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh God. You know they're coming out with another one?
Yeah.
Well, I
Uh,
think it's what's it called? Planet of the Apes movie.
movies.
There's a
I
total of
want
9.
all
I
of
can't
them.
believe it. I think it's no, it's all right. It looks like the sequel is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Yes. Golly. Ugh. For some reason I search for all of them. I only get like 3. I only get the old ones.
Yeah,
Battle
no, yeah,
for
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes I think was probably the one I
Dawn
hated the
of the
most.
Planet of the Apes. There's one called Battle for the Planet of the Apes. But yeah, the some of these are just
I hate these. I hate
ridiculous.
these so
Some of them
much.
are
I
so
hate them
bad.
so much.
Um, so at least we're not dealing with that.
You know what? You know what?
At least Tycho
Years,
Decay's clean.
years. You name your 2012 or anything like that. I hate it. I hate those.
Really,
You're just gonna give me a year. That's it.
it's hard to find.
Yeah, no, but I mean
What
that's a
about
but so
something with the year? What if you do like Godzilla 2000, or you do like
so
Cyberpunk 2044 or 2077 or whatever, 2047?
I'm I can't say that I hate it all that much. Like Blade Runner
2044, I think it is.
2049?
44, right?
No, I think it's 2049.
Yeah,
I think
2049. You're
that's
right. You're right.
I think
204.
that's acceptable um in a way, although at the same time it's very much playing off the nostalgia factor.
Hmm.
But that's like Godzilla 2000 wasn't actually called Godzilla 2000.
No,
It was just
it's
called
just called
Godzilla.
Godzilla, yeah, but it's
We call
Godzilla
it God's
2000.
Everyone else calls it Godzilla 2000. It came out in 1998, which people don't remember.
Yeah,
But that's yeah, that's the thing that always it's like, yeah, we call it Godzilla 2000 because everything around that time period was something 2000. You're
yeah.
like, oh, okay, we get it, we get it. New
Oh
Millennium, all that
shoot, no,
stuff.
there's a different Godzilla called Godzilla 2000
There
that came out
is.
in 1999. Holy smokes, yeah, it's a Japanese one. It's like a puppet, actual like big old puppet.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny. I did not know that.
wow. So
I was
even
talking. Yeah,
yeah, we're
I
both talking
was.
about 1998 Godzilla.
Yeah, we're talking about the Roland Emmerich one
Yeah,
with Matthew Broderick and Luke Besson.
yeah. Man, dude, there needs to be a phrase. Godzilla doesn't fall into these films, but it reminds me of these. Godzilla's a good example. Let me share this too while I'm at it. While we're talking about
Okay.
titles. So like we're sitting here, and if you made this title right now, you like, oh my gosh. Even at the time, I think it looked not great. It's just like a
Uh,
green glow with a 3D text with an outline, and you're like, I'm done. That's it. Gorgeous. Um,
it's got one of the best soundtracks ever
oh, I'm
for a
sure.
film.
The I've heard Godzilla -1 is supposed to be amazing.
That's what I've heard too.
I need to
Yeah.
watch it. I really like the other Godzilla. I got like beard in my mouth. So, anyways, back to our title. So, what was your reasoning here? I'll show it again, and we can talk
Yeah.
about why the words Tycho and Decay.
Yeah. So yeah, the well, it was interesting because again, it was the first thing I thought of is okay, what are sciencey terms or science fiction terms, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to horror. So like, and you basically just think of anything that happens in space. You're like, okay, Greek alphabet, Omega, Epsilon,
Right.
and then you'll go into and then I started and then I just basically started off just making lists of like okay what things like spark that and make it go, and I thought because I was just thinking of that part.
Right.
What is Mars, like different planet names, thinking of different stars. You've got Andromeda, you've got, so I was just going through that for the galaxies and so forth and making that list and then going okay
Mhm.
how can I pair that up. And the interesting thing is part of that is because I don't keep thoughts straight in my head all the time, all that well, is my mind would jump around just to different things. And I'd think about, okay, well, what other science fiction movies would be interesting? And then I would go down this rabbit hole of um, actually looking into like reading synopses of movies or
Mhm.
something. And like, oh, like, and then you get into like fun facts at X, Y, and Z. One of the things though that popped up was I looked at astronomers and so you had like Johann Kepler and all that. One of the ones that stuck out to me that I thought was pretty interesting was Tycho Brahe, I think it's pronounced,
Mm-hmm.
but he was the Dutch. I think he's Dutch, maybe no, I think Danish. But he's an astronomer in like the late 1500s, early 1600s, who uh, was like the last one before the telescope.
Mm.
So prior to inventing the telescope, he was an astronomer. And one thing that as I was reading up on him, I remember the thing that stuck out to me is that he was um, really accurate,
Mm.
like unprecedentedly. I think is what I remember reading in the Wikipedia article that I had looked up. And so I kind of kept going through that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And then, at the end of Wikipedia articles, there's always this thing at the end of it
Mm-hmm.
about like, oh, modern cinema and or like modern references and so forth, or
Mm-hmm.
like legacy, the cultural stuff. Well, one of the cultural stuff was that he is actually named after a lunar crater in the moon.
Our lunar crater in the moon is named after him.
Yeah. Sorry. So, well, yeah. So there's a crater in the moon called like the Tycho crater, effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually connected me to part of that is that's actually in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that obelisk is located.
Mm.
Because in the movie, there's an obelisk that you see at the beginning of the film where you have the monkeys with the bones and all that stuff, and they toss it in the air, and then it goes into space. Well, in the movie, it actually explains that this was found in that crater,
Hmm.
and that immediately was like, oh, it's got to be Tycho. Like, there's other
Right.
stuff we can do, and so I had a couple of other ones that but like I was like, Tycho's the best one because the connections of an obelisk, which is something that we now have with the monument kind of in there, that causing a transformation in humans where you can kind of connect those two. It was like, oh, and but it also has the connection through astronomy, through that as well, that it kind of like stood out. I was like, that's pretty cool how that comes about. And then the second part with the jungle was, okay, well, what is it that we're trying to convey? It was the word decay is really
Mm-hmm.
what came to it. Was you could have a lot of different things going on, but what's happening in the story that we're trying to tell? There's that decay part. It's what you see with Marmaduke at the end of it. Yeah, extrinsic was another one that I came up with.
Yeah. So we
Uh,
did a bunch of treatments. Just so people know, I did my homework. I didn't
yeah,
just. So we tried looking at a bunch of different kind of title treatments. With Tycho Decay, we saw about carries as one.
we did. I'm
It's
trying to remember
tau
what
theta.
Caries was now. Tau theta was
It's
another
just
one.
another
Tau
word for
theta,
decay,
I
but
think so. So tau
nobody
theta
uses
was
it.
actually life death, effectively. Like those are
Mm-hmm.
the symbols in the
Mm-hmm.
Greek alphabet that then apply to those ideas, or change. So it was like, okay, that kind of works too. You're right. Caries was about decay, is like the word decay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, because that was the other thing, is a lot of it was, okay, looking at words that people will know, kind of languages. What about Latin? What about
Mm-hmm.
Greek? How do those cross over to it? I think Carrie's might have been Latin, but I'm trying to remember off the top of my head for that one.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. The I think we kind of settled on also like because Tycho was kind of this like well-known space like astronomer and like type deal, that the chances are this little base that we have, our research base, would be named like the Tycho base, right? And so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
essentially like ties in. So we were able to make it like all kind of come together. Now this seems silly in a certain sense because it's like you just said, like, well, I think titles should have meaning. I don't like these titles that are just like meaningless. And there's this thing that happens, I think, when it comes to doing anything, like when an actor's like, what's my motivation? You're like, to get paid, so say the line, right? But there's this interesting thing where like having a story to be able to tell about the thing informs so many other decisions, right?
Mhm.
So it's like it might seem silly, but like that story is how you make the title objective, quote unquote, right? Like it goes from being like, what should the title be? It's like, it could be anything, to
Yeah.
then being like, well, let's come up with like an idea, like what are some themes, what are some people that we can draw off of, like let's develop a little backstory for it. And then what that lets you do is sort of have a more informed decision. And so, like, I do this with my clients where we create what's called a customer story, right? So you go, they want to make something, they want to make whatever it is, a video, let's say, and they're like, well, what should be in the video and how should it look? And I go, like, well, let's make a story about like a customer of yours and what are they looking for? What do they want? What are they hoping to do with their life? What do they have a dog? Do they not have a dog? Right? And we come up with this whole fake person, this persona, and then we run through, and then we go, okay, we're gonna make the ad for them. And if you make the ad for them, then you have a specific ad, and then you can say, well, which one's better for this guy with his dog? And it's like, well, that product, or we should talk about that feature. If you don't have a story to appeal to, then I go, well, what's a better title? And it's just like, there's no better. It's just all like, we could choose any words. It could have been, whatever we want to carries or something like that. But it's like having that story of being able to come up with, oh, this is why it's going to be named that way. The why, right? Again, I talk about why before how a lot. That's a really important part of this. So it's kind of funny because like there's a point where you could look at anybody and just be like, just who cares? Just make it whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to come up with, if you don't have a story built in, if there's not something automatically, intrinsically to your story that makes sense right away, then you're gonna have to like search for it and make it, right? And so,
Well, a perfect example is John Wick.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it was literally a movie just about a hitman getting revenge. That was it.
Right.
But it was so successful that they wanted to make sequels, and of course you're gonna be like, well, yeah, like we can make more sequels that will make money and they'll do well, but they have no world here.
Right.
So what happens? You just kind of start making stuff as it goes along to the point where, if I understand correctly, I still haven't seen the most recent one, but like he uses his like suit jacket as like a bullet, like to like block bullets, and you're like,
yeah, they make a bulletproof 3-piece suit essentially.
Yeah,
and then everyone
like,
has one.
Yeah, and it's just like, this is dumb now.
So,
like at that point, that's jumping the shark, in my opinion.
Well,
you're going so far off the reservation of what it was started as that you're just like, okay, so now we're gonna get another Fast and Furious where they're like going into space with dinosaurs and whatever. And you're like, all right.
So
but it's about family.
I can agree and also defend it. So I can agree that how you end up with this weird John Wick world is reverse engineering your story where there wasn't one, right? So essentially, like in the first one, it's him and he goes to this hotel, and the hotel, he needed, like plot wise, he needed to have like a safe space for a little while. And the whole point of the hotel is no one's allowed to kill each other in the hotel, but if he breaks the rules, he is out, right? And so I think the hotel's in the first one. It might only be in the second one they introduced the hotel.
No, that's in the second one. That's in the second one.
So in the first one, it's literally just him. You're right. The first one, it's literally just him versus the Russian mob.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then they have to introduce the
no,
hotel
maybe
in the,
the
second
hotel
one.
is in the first one.
It might be because he has the coin. He has to cash in the coin. He has like the people he cleans up and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it is in the first one.
Yeah. So there's a moment where he needs to take a breather, right? So it's like you have to have a plot point. So they have this hotel where you can like see somebody but not have to kill him right away.
Yeah.
And so then that hotel becomes the entire plot of the next 3 movies, right? Like it's sort of like Pirates of the Caribbean does this, right? Where the first one has like a few things, and then in the second movie you're like looking back at the first movie, going like, oh shoot, like, how do we come up with more plot? It's like, well, the Black Pearl is now going to have a whole plot line behind it being the Black Pearl. It's not just a ship that was Jack's. It has to be a special ship that once was a white sailed ship from the whatever, and then it got corrupted, and then it becomes a ghost ship. Like, so it can't just be like this legendary ship. So, and like she can't just be the daughter of the mayor, the governor's daughter. She can't just be the governor's daughter. She's actually a Klypto or whatever, like reincarnation of the sea goddess. And it's like all of a sudden everybody, Keira Knightley. All of a sudden everybody has to be somebody else, right? He can't just be the sword sharpening guy. He has to actually be the son of a sailor who made a deal with the devil, right? Like it's like everyone all of a sudden is more important than they were.
They were. But that's what I mean though. Is like you have to, like, I think that if you're doing if you start off with having a why behind everything, or at least a logic to it of like how we came up with something that is actually impacting in the story, It's a lot better than just being like, oh, we're just gonna go and make it up. Or that's also that might be a good case of, hey, maybe we don't need to do sequels for some of this stuff.
Yeah, you should know when to stop. That's part of it.
Like
Now,
I will say my one of my favorite movie titles is called Gross Point Blank, and it's
mhm,
also one of my favorite movies. I recommend everybody seeing it, but it's a comedy. It's got Minnie Driver and John Cusack. The reason why it's so brilliant though is the movie is about a hitman who goes to his 10-year high school reunion.
mhm,
It's and the easiest part is it's in so he's from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, which is
mhm.
GROSSEPOINTE, but he's a hitman, point blank. So
Yeah.
you basically have Gross Point Blank, and it's like so the play on words is just so freaking brilliant. I cannot believe it. Like would I would absolutely sit through a nice like 45-minute seminar of like how did you come up with that? Like
The
because I know the answer is well we did that. You're like cool, but that's not easy to do. Like you didn't just sit down one day and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's what we're going to do." It's like, "No, that was at least like you're either in a room with a group of people or you're mulling that in your mind and you're picking up on little things because you're going through so many iterations of how would we name this movie? And I guarantee that was not the original name of the movie.
I don't
It's
know,
not
dude.
the
I
original
don't know.
title.
I have a feeling like maybe whoever made it, if you hit send them an email, it'd be like it made the most sense. Obvious. It was obvious. Like
Yeah,
like
yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing.
like it was like
That is
I knew I wanted to set it in this town,
yeah, no, no,
and
no.
then
That's
I
the thing though. That is the creative. That's your brain then looking back at all the work and being like, oh, I kind of forget how I got there. Like I
yeah.
forget how I landed on this thing. Like I honestly probably if hadn't still had all the notes written down of how we got to Tycho Decay, I
Hmm.
wouldn't have been remembering half that. Like I forgot some of the titles
Yeah.
already because I'm like, okay, okay, carries. I don't know what that word means.
Right.
I did before because I looked it up.
No, the it's so funny how how the line between cringe and brilliant is sometimes thin with something like gross point blank.
And I know
Um,
it's
do
there
you
are
want
some
I
titles that are fantastic
I
though.
don't know
Oh,
how exactly this ties in. I don't know if I should segue to this yet. Let's tie up the loose ends on the thing. The other thing with the Tycho Decay, I just realized I stopped sharing because it was just playing and we were talking, but
yeah.
I'll share it again for just a second. Um, is its decay is pretty obvious with the design wise, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
falling apart. But Tycho, I actually this is a callback. This is a throwback to. I didn't look it up first, but I made it. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is because I was sitting there designing it, and I was like, I want these lines through it because everything when I think sci-fi, I think lines through text, right? Like that's something in my head. And I was trying to figure out, like, I'm sure this is a famous logo that's in my head, and uh, and I'm like, but I don't know what it's from. And then I searched, and I'm pretty sure that I found. I guess it wasn't aliens. I was looking for it, and I found it a few
I want
times in
I
my
wonder if
like
it's what was it?
alien. I think it's original Alien movie. Then I thought maybe it was Aliens.
Because I can tell you what it reminds me of,
What does it remind you of?
but it's not of a specific title. But it reminds me of Blade Runner
Yeah,
because
I can see
Blade
that.
Runner opens up with the lights pouring in from the shutters effectively on their faces.
Hmm.
So every time I see that, that's what I think of. So that's why for me it evoked sci-fi.
Yeah, and yes, it is Blade Runner. Blade Runner has. Oh, this is the other one, but it has the lines, but one through each,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Um, and so, and this is the original Blade Runner, where it's just the lines through Blade and Runner.
That's funny. Yeah,
But so like in my head, I was like, I want to do a throwback to like all these things that remind me of like sci-fi titles. Um, I'm curious. Titles. Let me do more than one because otherwise I'm getting
interesting.
stuck.
You do sci-fi with
Tron.
FI. Okay.
It depends on how you do it. I sometimes do it the other way. Sometimes I do it the I do it that way. I think because the channel, the TV channel, Sci-Fi channel,
Yeah.
had the
Yeah.
Y, I believe, right?
They added the Y. Yeah, it used to be sci-fi with FI.
Yeah, but I grew up like that's how I learned how to spell it was from the TV show, like the TV channel. the Sci-Fi Channel.
When did they change it to that?
It has lines, but the lines are going up and down.
Yeah, no, I don't think about that at all.
So anyway, that was like, I'm like, that's how you make something look futuristic, is you put lines through it. I'm pretty sure one of the Aliens movies had. I thought I looked this up and I was like, oh, crazy! I didn't even think about it. How ironic. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
Dude, Sci-Fi, it was still SCIFI all the way through 2009.
Well,
Yeah,
all of a
so
sudden,
I was like, it's not that old. It's since 2009 that they had the Y added instead.
that's weird. Oh, that's not what I want to do. I almost stopped our stream. All right, stop share. So that's the title, guys. That's the title. That's why it's called Tycho Decay, and that's why it looks the way it does. If we have time, do we want to look at some Furiosa trailer?
Yeah. I mean, I have
We don't
opinions.
have to.
I have opinions on it. I will say, okay, before as you're pulling it up,
Yeah.
one thing you could do with Tycho Decay is, instead of, how the Tycho words kind of, they glitch in to become aligned, you could actually have it, as time goes on, Decay starts coming apart and like drifting in it, to show that it's kind of like falling apart.
Yep,
so
that's what I want to do. That is the goal. But
it's brilliant.
Let me share my screen so you can see it as well.
Chops. Get out of here.
So I'm not going to play the trailer itself from start to end, because I think everyone's probably seen it and they don't need to watch it here. But I wanted to break down, if you haven't watched it, there's no one watching live.
I mean, you can play it and pause it. Yeah, but
well, I'm going to
play it through and then pause it when you point at it.
So there's a bunch of nitpicky things that I kind of just want to talk about. And everyone I've talked to has the same reaction, which is like, it looks like it will be fun and it looks like it will be like entertaining to watch, but it also looks kind of cheap. And so I kind of want to point out what I think that is. So right away, it starts in grayscale, and I know this is a tribute because there's a black and white version of Mad Max Fury Road, which is all black and white, and then there's the version we know. Yeah, I think so. I think it was all shot digital, but he just has like a black and white version of it. But right away, I think there's multiple things wrong with this. One is, I don't think they got the angle right. Like, my guess, and here's the thing, I'm not going to blame the designer. My guess is they laid it down actually parallel with the ground, but it was at such a obtuse angle that you couldn't read it. And so whoever was in the studio was like, hey, make it so I can read it. Like, I can't read that at that angle, but they still wanted it tracked to the ground. And it ends up being this weird, it messes with your head, and you go like, well, that's not the right angle for that. But if it was actually like pinned correctly, it wouldn't look as weird. And the other thing that makes it look weird.
It looks like well, because we're tracking the way that we're moving, it's supposed to be diagonal to where it's at. It's not supposed to be full head straight on to us, I don't think.
No, it is diagonal, but it should be like that. Like, if I could draw a line, I wish I had a pen active for this. But like, essentially, here's what I can do. I can do this. And then hopefully, does that not show up? Hello? Oh, I guess
it happens sometimes.
All right, let's do this again. Oh, I wonder if it doesn't let me do it because it's YouTube?
What? No.
What the frick is going on? Is it because I'm sharing my screen? Oh, well.
Do you have the snipping tool?
Yeah, I'm using... that's what I'm doing.
That. Well, if it's the newer one, sometimes it doesn't...
It's not doing anything.
Actually.
Print screen is what I just hit, and I grab it. I don't know, something going on with their call and OBS and everything else I'm doing. Maybe, who knows?
It's probably not.
But so anyway,
yeah.
So like this line, see how it's like going? It should be like that, like it, So and it's just not a good track. The other problem is the track, it slides, right? So you can like see if it was truly tracked, right? If this is supposed to be like a shadow being cast by something,
the words wouldn't be expanding.
Yeah,
the letters.
And this is something where like, yes, I'm nitpicking it. And like, by the way, first off, I'm not trying to call out people's work as bad. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Usually this is like a studio meddling issue, right? Like I said, the guy had it correct and the studio's like, lift it up, like make it so it's not so whatever. But the other thing is, this stuff, like, it does subconsciously tell you like, this doesn't feel very professional, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see this, the track isn't on there because you can see the text moving. So it's like weirdly floating. And I think the other problem is I don't think they match the camera angle. So the camera in whatever 3D tracking
No,
program they use.
well, the way that it's moving, the camera's moving is opposite.
Yeah.
Now, granted, yeah, it's like maybe that's what they wanted to do, but it's like, yeah, I get what you
Yeah.
mean.
And maybe this was like the last second of the last day. And sometimes, although this should track pretty easily. I kind of want to like take and fix this. But anyway, and then they fade up from that. It's a classic oversaturated stuff. This is all cool.
I mean, I've told you this. I will say it again. Mad Max Fury Road is. I did not like it. I think it's overrated.
Well, you're wrong. It's amazing. So
I'm not, but I'm surely not.
So, okay, and then my next nitpick is this. So they have this like whole thing where it's like after years of whatever, and this is tracked well enough, and they did a really good job. There's some really hard visual effects stuff to do here, that they did a pretty good job with. And by the way, here's the other thing: no one's supposed to do what I'm doing, right? No one's supposed to be sitting here like picking apart someone's work frame by frame. So again, there's plenty of things that you'll get away with, because it's people don't get to do this. Like, and like here's one of the problems with like trailers today. Like back in the day, you could watch a trailer like once in the movie theater before your movie you were gonna watch.
That was it. Yeah, you're not
and
watching
then
it
like
again.
now
Unless
you
you're going
gotta
to see another movie.
now you gotta do what I'm doing, and so it's a big disservice. And then everything's 4K, so like you can't just blur the crap out of something. Well, like this is annoying. This is hard to figure out over here.
I mean, look? Can I be honest?
Yeah.
Does anyone care?
About her
Does
backstory,
anyone
all this
care
thing.
about Furiosa? Like, a young Furiosa? No one. I don't care. I don't
Well,
care.
That's not my biggest problem. Here's my biggest problem right here.
No, but answer my question. Does anyone really care? Does anyone really? Was anyone in their right mind in the past 10 years being like, whose Odyssey I need to see finished or started or whatever? Furiosa. That's what I was thinking about. That's the character. That is the character who's sticking in my mind. When I was about to fall asleep the other night, I was like, you know what? I wonder what Furiosa would have been doing. How her journey went.
I actually am curious with Furiosa, but I didn't want a prequel. I wanted a sequel. Like they set it up, right? Like at the end, I guess at the end they just win. I guess that's the answer, is like they've won, so there's no more story. There's no story about how they have to defend the people now that they have the water, now that they have the kingdom. That's what I thought they were setting up for, and that's why Max like leaves, right? Like Max goes away, Furiosa now is in charge, and so it's like I thought that was them establishing her as a character, and then now she's going to take over kind of the series, and we're going to follow her around. But instead, it's like we're going to go backwards. But if you're going backwards, then Max is still around. So why aren't we following Max? If you're going forward, it kind of makes sense. If you're going backwards, you're like, well, Max exists, so maybe he'll make a guest appearance. But then that doesn't make any sense because she
plenty of opinions that will piss people off, and I am right on all of them, but no one wants to hear it.
All right.
But that's because nobody cares.
All right.
Nobody cares about this.
Biggest nitpick with this trailer. Again, I'm guessing this is somebody meddling. So it zooms in to this is her story. Very clearly, we're zooming into this gap between the R here, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of nice. They put some chromatic aberration on the edges, and this is just a nice touch if you're a motion design person or a design person. So it's not just a boring like push right into the middle, even though it's a little bit overused at times. So we're pushing in, right? Okay. So the screen should go what? If we push into here, what should the screen do?
Black.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that.
This was the most jarring
but
cut
you're right.
to
That
me.
is pretty...
Well, I'm watching like the cuts. I'm watching the editing. So I'm like, we're going in. I'm like, wait. Why did it just turn white? That makes no sense. Why? You lost the motivation, right? The motivation for pushing into the text
Go back
was
a little bit,
to
play it all the way through.
transition, right? Was to
don't
transition.
Pause it. Just
okay.
Yeah, just okay. Right there is fine. Right there is fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to see. I want to see it happen. Yeah, that's really weird. That does come off as weird. I don't know why you do white.
I don't know why you wouldn't why you wouldn't cut to black and then fade up instead of fading down from white. I've been assaulted by a cat. There's now a cat that lives on me. So that didn't make any sense to me. And I was just like, what?
You know what doesn't make... I mean, I'll stop.
What doesn't make sense to me? Why anyone likes the first one?
Well, no, I was going to say why anyone wants to see this.
I think there's a lot of people very excited about it. It was the other movie was really fun. So I don't care about this guy. I don't care about that. This next scene is the next one that.
Oh, I thought
So
you meant you didn't care about them at all, like
no,
in the movie. I'm like, well, obviously,
the
because
editing's good.
none of it matters.
So this really bothers me, and I think there's going to be a lot of people pointing out and saying. So like, I'm trying to defend this, I guess, right? Is what I'm saying. So
You are absolutely defending it against
so
me for sure.
so this next scene, I think a bunch of people are going to call out and be like, "Oh, the CGI is awful. This movie's going to be bad. You know, bad film, bad CGI." Right? And I've already made one video about why CGI is not as bad as people think it is. But in this scene, my guess is it's just not finished. Okay, so my guess is they need a trailer. They're still in production, and so they're like, "That's good enough. Show it." Right? And the team's like, "Oh, but we still have like 4 more passes." But I do want to explain why this looks bad. Oh, what the heck did I just do? I was on the wrong thing. Okay. So there's a few reasons, and normally the culprit is lighting, and here it is lighting and values. So
Yeah,
what you'll notice is the shadows here drop off to like black. Like this shadow is completely black.
yeah,
However, the shadows over here, the sun is clearly over like off
yeah.
screen up to
It
the
should
left.
it shouldn't drop like that. You should be
It
able to
should be the
see what's
same. Well,
illuminated in there.
this no, it's not even that. This just needs to be the same as this. So like that should be consistent. So if this is as
Well, yeah,
dark
yeah.
as the darkest shadow on set, then the darkest thing here should match that.
Yeah,
Right?
but
And the
that's what I
same like in
mean
his
is that
pants or whatever.
yeah, but that's what I mean is it should be illuminated a little bit more that you can actually see within that and within the cab because that's what's matching the
Right.
shadows.
So that's problem number one. Problem number two is these oil rigs aren't casting any shadows at all. The sun is obviously on this side of the rig. You can see where it's hitting, and this hole is shining a light there, and then that's not casting any shadow down on anybody, any of these people or this. So that's the next problem. The other thing is all these people were green screened,
Yeah,
and then
100%.
composited, and there's no contact shadows below their feet. It's like this
Yeah,
guy's foot is just like looks like it's floating because there's not a contact shadow. Now it looks like they have sideways shadows on the ground, but there's no contact shadows. And so now again, I think this is just they're working on it, right? And I would expect that when you see this in finished form in the theaters, all that's fixed. But what I'm trying to do is like for the audience people that go, it feels bad, and then you don't know why it feels bad, but you just say it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel real. And it's like, well, why does it not feel real? That's usually the case. So usually when people go, well, I don't like CG because it doesn't feel real, it's not that there isn't CG. It does look perfectly real and you've never noticed it. It's that they haven't finished it, right? And oftentimes it's not finished because of, like I said, production stuff. So here, very clearly, like I saw this and I like, it just felt awful. And I was like, why does this feel so bad? And so I had to sit there and break it down. So those are a couple of reasons. One, no contact shadows. Two, no shadow from the crane. Three, the values don't match at all on from this guy to this thing. So they haven't like done. Now the other problem is I'm kind of thinking because this kind of happens throughout the rest of this trailer. I kind of think they might have screwed themselves with the color palette. Like because they like made it so saturated, I
hmm
think getting them to match is like way harder. Sort of the easiest thing to comp if you're like compositing stuff is like something in fog
yeah,
because like you can get away with like coloring everything kind of the same color and
yeah,
putting it
yeah.
off into the distance and like and that stuff usually looks really really good when you
It
composite
works
that
as a
stuff.
bit of a mask. Yeah,
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 yeah. So and then like you don't see the contact shadows. You don't see where something meets something else is like often where things break apart. Like
yeah.
where a building meets the ground. Like one of the things a lot of people forget about when designing like a room in 3D is like the baseboards. And because in
Yeah.
your head you never see them. So when you're making, you're like, that's just what walls look like, right? And you're like, something doesn't look right about this room, and you're like, that's how they look. And it's like, no, no,
Nope.
there's a little detail in this wall close to the bottom where it connects, and then there's also usually a lot of dirt like in the corner. So like the corners should be dirtier, they shouldn't be as clean, they should be
Or
darker.
if you'll see it if you want to know a good remodel from a bad one, you
Mm,
can look to see if there's a little gap because the baseboards weren't placed down properly. So
right,
there's actually a little gap between the bottom and the floor, and it's like, well, that's
right,
not supposed to be there. That's what
yeah.
the whole point of it.
And
So,
so all those details are subconscious to us, right? But
mhm.
I've had multiple people say this trailer feels cheap, right?
Yeah.
And then what they're really saying, I think, is there's unfinished CGI, the tracking's not perfect, there's a few weird art
So
direction choices.
go back a little bit
Yeah.
to the sandstorm. Is that going the right
This is the
direction?
first time. Actually that's hilarious. That's a good point. Let's see.
I
They
was just like
it
after the
looks
mummy,
like
I was like, I don't know if that's the right direction. I might.
I think it is.
I
Yeah,
think it's.
it looks
I
like
think it's going.
they referenced some haboobs. It's thicker, that's for
Yeah, you
sure.
gotta go.
Everyone.
Yeah, you have to go back a little bit more because
Well,
it's
that's the
just.
only one, right? Only Sandstorm, or the one farther? Is there another
No, I
one?
did. No, I just no, no. That's right there. But you're. It's cutting too quickly.
Oh yeah, we'll pause. Yeah, it works. It's coming
Okay.
kind of up. It's just
Yeah,
going
it looks like it's
sideways.
coming up. It looks like it's coming up.
Yeah. The
All right.
nothing's this thick is sort of the problem. Although they got some stuff here, but like when you go and look at a real sandstorm, like it's really not as thick as you'd like it to be. So this is
Yeah.
fine though. Like you're allowed to art direct stuff. You're allowed to like thicken up stuff. Like liquid never looks as good in real
No.
life as it does in movies. Like you want like these extremes in like real life. It's just like a little drips, you know. I already talked about that stuff. Uh, you don't like her casting. I'm not the biggest fan. This
I
also
don't like any of this.
feels a little unfinished too.
I'm telling you, I don't like any of this.
I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with these.
The bullets.
Yeah, I don't know if if it's like I think it's a motion blur problem. I think they're not as blurry as they should be actually. If that sounds crazy with how blurred they are, or they might be doing like the wrong type of blur. I don't know. It's
Interesting.
not quite there.
Yeah, it does seem a
Um,
bit.
and I'm picking this up as someone who hasn't even finished their first short film, right? So like, take all this as like, you know, oh, I'm not trying to break, like someone could do this with anything I've made. Like the Mummy, you could find a billion things wrong with that Mummy piece I did. Like a lot of things wrong.
That didn't look good.
Yeah, I think mostly what it is, it's not quite done. But then there's a part of me that's like maybe they're going for hyper
Well, that's just
real. Like
the physics of that just doesn't track,
yeah,
really. Like it's
there's something off about it. I think mostly for me, almost all of these, it's like the lighting and the color and the motion blur.
like right there in real life, if your car digs in like that, even a
Yeah.
dune buggy out in the dunes, if it digs in like that, you're flipping over.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of a dune buggy with the suspension, is to make sure that you don't bottom out or dig in on the front.
Yeah.
So it's something like that where you're like, oh, that doesn't look right, and then it's too smooth. It's not it's too smooth.
Yeah, like ultimately I don't really care when it comes to like CG if it's quote unquote believable, because if the movie's good, you don't care. Like just like the original Planet of the Apes that has like guys in monkey
I know
suits,
what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
and it's like that's not believable. But I'm trying to break down why it feels cheap when someone says this feels like a cheap trailer.
Well, but that's the thing, is I think that
This is
when you can look at something and be like, they didn't do that with a real car, that's because that's where we've talked about, CGI.
mhm,
It's not that, oh well, we just need to have practical effects. It's like, no, it looks bad because this is poor CGI. Like, you
right,
can do CGI where you won't notice it, but if you are doing that and I can notice the CGI, then it's not good CGI. Like, that's the whole
right.
point.
Well,
That's kind of what I mean, is like, that's where I'm like, no, I can. That's why I think it feels cheap to other people too, is they see that and go, oh well, yeah, I know that's CGI.
Well, it's also I think one of the bigger problems to me is like art directors and directors not being able to say no. Like they want to
Hmm.
do something, they want it to look a certain way, and whoever's running that sim is like, hey, when the car bottoms out like this, they might have made the point you made. Like that's not going to look good, and it's like, who cares, right? And and the directors aren't wrong, by the way. Like if the movie's working and if you're having a good time, it doesn't matter that Jaws is a puppet. It doesn't matter that, you can see, it doesn't even matter if you have huge continuity errors. Like you can have Jurassic Park where one moment there's a cliff, you cut to the T-Rex, he does something, and you cut back and there's no cliff. All of a sudden. Or like T-Rex walks up, and then there's a cliff there and you're like, how do you walk up if there was a cliff, right?
Hmm.
um that's actually not that important if the willing suspension of disbelief is high.
Yes.
the
Yes.
so the director's correct. However, all these things add up, and like you
But yeah,
can't, you
that's what.
don't
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't get a limited version of, you don't get a limited of that. Like you
Well,
can
yeah,
have a
yeah.
couple moments where something that doesn't make sense, I let it go. But like a good example of this is like if you're in a hotel room, right,
Hmm.
and it's a fancy 5-star hotel, and you go into the bathroom and the countertops are wet, like they just have like water on them already. You're like, huh, that's weird, but it's still a super nice hotel, 5 stars, right? But then if the countertops are wet and the shower is like dripping, like leaking, and you can't turn that off, you're like, okay, and your bed's not made, and there's stains on the carpet, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, this whole experience is broken down. I don't believe it's 5 stars. I don't believe this is a fancy thing, And it's the same thing with anything else. Like, yeah, oftentimes if you make a meal, it doesn't have to be made perfect. Like, there's some things can be a little burnt, some things can be a little whatever. Most people won't notice. But when you have, a comedy of errors, right? Then all of a sudden this whole thing's broken down, and
Yeah.
and so
But that's my point though, is that those things though are the things that break suspension of disbelief. Like
right,
if you're going to have bad effects, yes, that can absolutely break it. You can have a movie that's good and you're fine and enjoying it, and you know that it's a bad effect. But
right,
it's stuff like that where you're like, okay, but that will take you out. That is the type of stuff that can take you out of it.
right.
So that's where my issue comes with the effects of like, yeah, sure, you can get away with it, but you are not allowed to abuse it, and that's where you're abusing it. It's like, no, 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 your movie's not good enough to do that.
I really hope that when this thing takes off, one of the characters turns to the other characters, goes, "They fly now. They fly
Ugh,
now."
yes, please. Ugh.
Wouldn't that be great?
I
They give it away, which is kind of lame. There's one of the things that does look like a lot of fun. Like I love this concept. Like some concept artist drew him with chariot of motorcycles, and
Yeah,
I am here for it. I love this. I love the little
I
sidecar
hate the
with a
fact you just
flamethrower.
said that because I hate that stupid slang term.
What? I'm here for it.
Yes, I can't handle
Oh
it.
yes,
It's just it
I
drives me
am
up the wall.
here for it. I
I
love it.
also look at that and
Slay, queen,
I
slay.
really want to slap you. I I look at that and I just think, again, I watched the trailer and I
Yeah,
think you saw my face when I was watching it.
I
So we were
did.
prepping for
Your
this,
face was
and
so bad.
it was not. There was no happiness. There was no happiness. There's nothing in this trailer that made me be like, yes, I am excited to see this.
Oh,
So
I'm
go ahead,
excited.
hit
I'm
play,
excited
hit
for a
play,
few things.
hit play.
And then the chariot. So this is where I can't tell if they're screwed by their choice of color palette and lighting, or if it's unfinished CG. Because, like, first off, this is just hell on a green screen. Having to like have a cloth that has a green screen behind it, and then you're comping it out and trying to rotoscope it. And it's somewhat transparent, but somewhat like that's almost impossible to get right. People have pulled it off brilliantly. Dune actually solved this problem. The movie Dune, why all the visual effects look so good,
Hmm.
is they weren't using green screens. They figured out we should use essentially screens that are the same color as the background. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of them is you don't get a reflection of this green screen if it's like a giant one or a giant blue screen tinting everything blue or green,
When you're saying as the background, you mean as what they want it to be in the
as what
movie?
it is in real life. So like if you're shooting in a brown desert, the screen you're using
Yeah, it needs to be
should
brown.
also be brown. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's okay.
Um,
I'm following.
yeah. So anyway, but then again, there's like this lack of contact shadows. But then I'm like, well, are these CGI feet and a CGI cart and only the top half? So like, I don't know exactly what's making this feel so bad, but to me, it might be because they they did this crazy color palette where like everything's so bright and so saturated that it's sort of ruining the ability. You're like, normally what you'd use to comp stuff in, normally what you'd like, I would color pick these shadows from like here, right? But then it's like, oh, but then now it's gonna be look really orange and weird because we've colored that so much. So like knowing what to reference for what is becomes like a problem for the compositor. And the other thing is compositing is what happens last, right? So a lot of these scenes, like, oh, the CGI is more or less done, but we're not done compositing yet. We're like halfway through the composite. This is also just awkward. I think this thing blows up like in front of his face. So here it's like blowing around. He has this cape tied to him, but then as it like, gets close, it's like just like right in front of his face. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't have done another take where it wasn't like covering his. I don't know. Maybe it's just his beard fluttering in the wind. Um, This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. I don't know. I think maybe it's all an art
You
direction
say this is
choice.
fine, and I could just imagine you sitting in a room that's burning.
Yeah.
That's my depiction. But
Well,
continue.
I do wonder if this is all an art direction choice to have it be like hyper real, like hyper. I'm pretty sure that's a lot of it, but it's kind of
It
making this.
has to be. It
It's
has to be.
making the CGI though really hard to like to buy when you do that. So yeah, this guy clearly at some points takes off, right? They've given it away now with his little propeller thing here. Um, so
You know what this is?
I bet he ignites some balloons. It looks like he has some hooks here. So I bet he's driving it.
Yeah.
And then as he's driving
you know
it,
what
the
this
balloons
is though?
pop up. What?
This is Pacific Rim 2.
So that's my worry. So right. Everything you're saying is completely like Pacific Rim 1, super grounded, establishes the look, establishes the feel, and then they make Pacific Rim 2, and it's like, let's have them do backflips. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
the robots can't do backflips. That completely ruins it. And that's how what I think has happened with this. I agree. It's the same reason why Pacific Rim 2 feels cheap, even though they spent way more money on it. Right? And it's like you refuse to keep any of the grounding. And this is like Mad Max Fury Road is one of my prime examples of films that people think don't have any CGI in it, but has like
Yeah.
a ton of CGI in it. But it's because they kept themselves grounded, and also they just hide so much of it in like explosions and in like sand storms and stuff. And then here there's like none of that. Everything's so open and clean, and I'm like, dirty that frame up. Let me hide some stuff with grain. Like let me it's like grain and fog are your friend as a CG person. Like you want everything to be full of dirt. That actually doesn't look too bad, to be honest. It feels a little weird. The other thing is they're shooting so many things at weird frame rates. Like I wonder if they shot this at a higher frame rate, the whole thing, you know? To get this like hyper sharp, hyper real, no motion blur. Because that's the other problem is the motion blur is like all weird. Because certain things should have a lot of blur on them that don't, and that usually means you shot it at a higher frame rate. And like the fact I can see like every single hair is sort of nuts. That's like okay.
It reminds me of the whole Zack Snyder stuff. Like
Yeah.
I know it isn't being like necessarily slow motion, but it's the same type of feel of like whatever what was it, 300 type thing. With
Well,
with just how it comes across.
love that crap. Well, here like they've obviously like just throw like through like a linoleum or something all over the lens. Like this is actually all like there's actually bloom.
Yeah.
And her eyes almost look like they're drawn in there because they're so detailed and everything else is completely blurred out, you know, and has like a softness filter on it. Like I don't know. Now that ending's really weird to me because like here you can see like every detail right of every little piece of everything, and then you hit this and it's just like we just blur it, just blur the darn
You
thing.
want to know why? Because she's supposed to be otherworldly, like a god.
I don't know.
Yeah, man. That's why you do that. It's supposed to be this holy figure because you're having having the light behind. It's trust me, it's you notice something too in the title. It's still a Mad Max saga. So they're still riding the coattails of Mad Max.
Yeah.
Even though they have nothing to do with Mad Max anymore. Like, get out of here. Mad Max was good. This was crap. Mad Max Fury Road was crap.
Wow. How many? I just realized.
Okay, it wasn't crap.
I didn't read this the first time.
Overrated.
I like Mad Max. I didn't read this the first time, but like, so like taken from her family, right? Okay. And then she will devote the rest of her life to find her way home. This is completely unnecessary. This is her odyssey. It's like how many hers?
Yeah, I don't. That's my point. I'm like, her odyssey,
and then we smashed to white.
No one cares about what odyssey. No, stop it.
I don't know. Some of that's I think some of it's remember her is weird. I don't understand what. It's weird to say like remember her too when we're like Mad Max Saga. I just think that's weird marketing. I think you could just say like you could just have a story about I'm not at all mad about having a story about Furiosa or any other character. Like really is Max the most interesting part of Mad Max? No. The most interesting part of Mad Max is the world. It's like Fallout,
Mm,
right? Like the arguing that the most interesting part of Fallout is like whatever your character is not true. Like the world of Fallout, the interesting part, most interesting thing is the world, right? Like it's not like Max is this brilliant character that like is super well written and that we like, it's like it's a dystopian fun world where we drive cars around and blow stuff up.
well, yes, but the whole point is that Mad Max is the vehicle through that. This is
Yeah.
just nonsense. This is just nonsense. This is just a decade. It's almost a decade since the last movie came out. Nobody was asking. Like we moved on from it. This was simply, oh yeah, we can make a
So
buck or
this
two.
is an interesting
It's
discussion if we want to get into it, or we can wrap up because we've
probably
gone
not
through the
tonight.
trailer.
Probably not tonight.
But
I can assure you, my opinion will not change.
I'm sure it won't. But I think anything can be good. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Like everyone was saying this about Prey before Prey came out. It was all like, "Oh, it's gonna be bad. Oh, it's woke. Oh, it's
Hmm.
whatever," and they are all completely wrong. And it was a great film, right? Like,
Okay.
so like you can have a film about a character no one's interested in, that nobody wants, that you make amazingly well, and it's really really great,
Yeah.
right? Like you can make something that there's no demand for. You can make a Star Wars film about um, someone that isn't Luke or Leia or Han, right? And it could be
Absolutely.
the best one,
Absolutely.
right? Like Rogue One is the
Yes.
best of all the new Star Wars films, and it's not about if you showed me, I could do the same thing, right? You could look at that and go like, who asked for this story about this random Jen Urso? And like, why do I care, right? And they could tell it in a way and make a good story that's interesting. So like that's not really um you know I hold out on that stuff, right? Like who knows,
I
is
yes.
it typically indicative of something maybe not, that's not the best. I do think that movie, by the way, that we just watched the trailer for, Furiosa, will be a lot of fun. Like just
I
seeing the like flying car and the chariot like with the three motorcycles, I'm like, this is
it will
gonna
be
be
a lot
fun.
of fun for other people than for me.
Oh golly.
But my only counterpoint is that yes, but the difference between Rogue One and this movie is that um, Rogue One was, hey, let's tell the story. Like, how did this come about of this event? That
Right.
we all know about this event.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? So that's a little bit different. That's kind of the start from. This one is, hey, remember Furiosa? How did she get to where she was? It's like, well, did anyone really care? Like you even said it yourself. You're like, I thought that like they were gonna retire Mad Max as a character
Oh,
and go with
I
Furiosa, who's just as boring of a character as Mad Max, for the
I'm
record.
I'm with you. I
Yeah, but
think
that's my point. Is
but
I
I
don't have high hopes for it.
yeah, but I think the idea of like this will ruin this or that's why it's bad isn't the case. Like I think why things are bad is because they're bad. Right? Like it's not because there were no way to use those ingredients. Does that make sense?
Uh,
So like you if I go, "Oh, hey, you should try this dish. It's parmesan, chocolate, and this." You'd be like, that doesn't sound like it's going to be good." I'm like, "You won't believe it, but it actually works."
okay, well,
Right?
okay. So
Now,
here's a.
wait. So cuz like
I'm
here's
not
a
buying that analogy.
well no,
Sorry.
here's what I'm saying though, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
there are plenty of things that don't seem like they'll work and that work, and there's plenty of things that seem like they should work and don't work. And like this is why bad things get made a lot, is because like art's actually a lot harder than it seems. Like when you go out to make something, after like knowing if it's good is kind of difficult. And really to me the only thing that matters is it good, right? Like at the end of the day, is this a good film, right?
Yes.
And then you can make a good film out of what does not seem to work at all. and
Yes.
and
But
it's
okay. But
and I
so
can't
here's
tell
the
you
better analogy
why
though.
certain
But
films work.
the better analogy is that you can make a batch of brownies and screw it up with traditional ingredients.
Right.
You can make a batch of brownies and add some new unique ingredients and it can come out great. Or you can make a batch of brownies with new unique ingredients and it can come out trash.
Right.
So I get where you're coming from.
Right.
But if you sit there and you're going to tell me, well, Parmesan cheese and chocolate and hot sauce to go together, no, they don't. And
Well, they don't. But I've
there's
had.
no way
But
you're going to get
I've
that to come
no. It's not
across.
no
I'm
way.
sorry.
I've had people make it work. Like I've had people make things that I don't think should work that work.
Sure,
Like
but
that happens
there
all the
is
time.
probably a reason behind it, and that's my point. Is I look at this and say this is a cash grab. It's more likely to be Pacific Rim 2. It isn't something that anyone really needs. But then I also look at the old film and go, I get why people like it. I don't get why they like it so much because it wasn't as good as everyone said it was.
Well,
Everyone
yeah.
rants and raves about it, and it's like,
Very,
yeah,
very
how many
few,
people are
very
watching that
few
movie
things are
every
as good
single?
as everybody says they are.
Well,
Like,
but that's just it. People are like, it's incredible, it's so great. It's like, how many times are you going back and watching that movie?
um,
Come on.
I think, well, I've watched it a few times. I think one of the things that's interesting to me is, I don't know. I need to make this video. I've been putting it off. I'm toying. I don't know. I'm toying with doing
Well,
more
we can
things I
talk
need to
about
do.
we got to
But
wrap up. We got to wrap
yeah,
up. This
let's
is
wrap
going
up. So
long
that's why
anyways. We'll wrap up.
Furiosa
We can
looks
talk. You
cheap,
can toss that idea.
and our logo. So there we go, guys.
All right.
I don't know
Get
where
out of here.
my end live stream button
Next week
went to.
we'll come back with another one.
Alrighty. I have no idea if anyone's gonna watch this. Oh, it says there's one concurrent viewer.
You
Nice.
literally say that every time.
Yeah, and it always
Literally
gets
every
like
time.
40,
Just end the
40
stream.
views.
End the stream. Just end it.
Bye.
You're gonna start apologizing.